It is Thursday, the 13th of July, 2017, and you're listening to Skeptics with a K, the podcast for science, reason, and critical thinking. Skeptics with a K is a production of the Merseyside Skeptic Society, a non-profit organisation for the promotion of scientific skepticism on Merseyside, around the UK and internationally. I am your host, Mike Hall. With me today is Marsh.
Hello.
Alice.
Hello.
And we have a special guest today, returning from the Christmas Shambles episode. It's Emma.
Hello.
Sober.
Sober this time. Yeah.
As indeed are we all, as indeed am I ever.
Yeah, we are going to be sober, which means there's no weird green liquids.
No.
There's no me shouting over everybody and being a bellend. You get to actually have your say on this show, Emma, and you'll be only minimally interrupted.
And so you have...
I don't think you can ever promise it'll be minimal interruption.
Minimal
Even
is sliding.
sober.
Minimal is
Minimal
the lowest...
compared to what Marsh
Minimal compared
is drunk.
to drunk
Yeah,
Marsh.
exactly. Minimal is the smallest possible amount. So I can promise...
Which is non-zero.
Obviously, it's non-zero.
Which is non-zero, clearly.
Exactly.
So we're in Alice's flat today. We're recording in Alice's flat
Yeah,
today.
we're just on tour. We're on the shittest tour ever.
Yeah.
You have my kitchen, Alice's... I'm
Kitchen,
just
basically.
about in Alice's kitchen.
Yeah,
you guys aren't in
I have
Alice's kitchen.
an open flat.
That's like open studio plan flat.
Well,
isn't
large
it?
parts of your flat are more open than they normally would be.
Well,
in that you've got lots of floorboards
half
up.
of my floor is up at the minute. I've taken off all my...
What's happened to your floor, Alice?
Well, we got back to Barcelona, which the listeners are never going to know anything about because we lost all of that ramble from the last episode.
Good ramble, though.
It was good ramble.
It was good ramble. We had some quality banter at the top of last show, which we had to cut. It involved hobnobs. There was jokes about Johnny Vaughan in there.
Yeah, I brought a wife.
Marsha's wife turned up. It was brilliant.
It was great.
All lost to the ether.
I told us all about my holiday in Barcelona, which I'm not going to repeat. But we got back, and the day after, I managed to flood my flat.
How did you flood your flood? How did you red lorry, yellow lorry?
I put something in the bath to soak, switched the cold tap on, shut the bathroom door. It immediately stopped existing, walked away, and our bath doesn't have a drainage thing, an overspill, so it poured over the bath.
You know baths don't work like Schrodinger's cat. It's not
It
like...
stopped existing.
It just stops existing when you close the door. It's in a superposition of flooded and not flooded.
I'd gone and sat on the sofa. I was sat watching Gilmore Girls, and then I got a knock on my door. And as I went to answer the door, I had to wade through water in my kind of dining room area of living space. The kitchen, the hall was totally flooded. The bathroom was obviously totally flooded. And I answered the door, having to pull back the dog at the same time to one of my neighbours, not my downstairs neighbours.
Right.
My below that downstairs neighbours.
2 floors down.
That's a lot
It
of
got
distance
2
for the water to
floors
go.
down.
Knocked on my door to tell me, I think your flat's flooding. I was
How
like,
did they know it was your flat?
Presumably they've been
they
to the
checked the other
in-between one.
Well, they'd gone to the in-between one, but they weren't in, and they didn't turn up for much later until much later in the day. So we couldn't get in touch with them for ages to find out what the damage to their
Was
flat
the water coming out the front door as well?
Possibly. I have no idea. I don't know how they knew, but they knocked on ours. I was just kind of like, yeah, shit, I need to deal with this, and I've got a dog, and shut the door, and he went away. And
Was the dog also flooded by this point? Presumably the dog was also flooded by this point.
the dog was just having a great time running around in the water, drinking the water. He likes water, so he was quite happy.
Okay.
So I just then had to chuck every towel, every piece of bedding that I owned down on the floor to try. Obviously, turn the bath tap off and pull the plug out.
That's a good start.
That's
where I would have started, yeah.
Start. And then started soaking everything up with towels and things, and then got a knock from the neighbours again saying, "Are you okay? Can we help with anything?" And finally, at this point, could actually have a conversation with them and discovered that none of their electrics in their bathroom were working, or they'd had to switch off their electrics because they were worried about them. And yeah, my entire flat was flooded. It took me an entire day an entire evening to get all the water up. But then once I got the water up, realised that the water had kind of seeped into the gaps between different types of flooring. So we have the floor plates between the kitchen and the living space because we've got laminate flooring, and all the floor plates between the doors in the hall. I had to take all of those up to try and get all the water from out underneath the laminate, because every time I walked on the laminate, it was squelching.
Because they call it, like this kind of laminate, they call it floating floor.
Yeah.
It quite literally is.
Yeah.
Now.
So
You were basically on a raft at that point.
it was making a very very interesting squelching noise. The problem was it had flooded underneath, so it had obviously underneath the laminate. There's just a bit of polythene, like plastic thing, and then there's whatever is the floor underneath that. I don't know if it's concrete, and every time I walked like much further down, away from the edges, it was squelching. So in order to get the water out, I was having to kind of stand on different parts of the floor, wedging the gaps with kitchen paper.
Toothpaste effect.
Yeah, filling up that kitchen paper, chucking it away, using my body weight to kind of push the water out of the flooring. So I spent the entire evening like babysitting my laminate flooring to try and get all the water out, and I still got all the floor plates off because I want it to be fully dried before I really put everything back in and encourage all the mold to grow, because, you know.
I mean, and we probably have got some mates who are really into mould who'll be very excited.
Got some mates who are into mould?
What kind of things I can grow under my floors?
We've got mates who are into yeast.
We have.
We have got mates who are into yeast.
We've got mates who are into physics.
I've got mate.
I don't think it's a straight line between yeast and physics that takes you through mould.
It definitely goes through mould. Yeast and moulds are very...
They're cousins, aren't
they?
They're
in each other's orbits.
Actually,
there.
I was at one of our friends. I was at a Meet the Scientists event run by the University of Liverpool yesterday.
Yes.
Did you meet any scientists, or were you the scientist being met?
I was one of the scientists.
Nice.
I was helping out with one of the stalls there, and one of our friends, Angela, who comes to Skeptics, was running a microbes event there, so she's interested in bugs.
There you
it's
go.
Not quite exactly the same as mould.
Close enough, though, isn't it? Yeah.
So that was fun. We had like loads and loads of little kids coming and making DNA bracelets and trying to tell them how to be superheroes.
That sounds cool.
And they were very young kied, so we kind of had to really simplify it.
You lied to them.
We lied to them. We were like, well, what if we have... You can't use the word mutation with kids, apparently, because it freaks them out, or freaks the parents out.
It freaks the parents out.
Freaks the parents out. I can go with that. I mean, kids, mutation would be like, wow, cool, mutation. Spider-Man mutated, didn't he?
But that's the thing. So we were telling them about changes in DNA and how a change in your DNA might give you superpowers. So we were giving them like invisibility.
Lies.
Like
you were lying to children. Get them at an early age.
Not would.
I mean,
might it though?
It might give you superpowers of a slow accumulation of changes in DNA over time, followed by selection.
I mean, it might give you cancer as well.
It may
it's
also
more
give
likely
you
to give you cancer.
And
What if you said that?
That's why...
Imagine if we could slightly change your DNA and you might get cancer. Yay! Have some sweets.
And that's why parents don't like the word mutation.
Right, I see. So you say carcinogen, cancer, or super death.
So we did the lying thing and told them that it could give them superpowers. But they were very young kids. They were like from the youngest kid we had. Well, the youngest kid we had was one of our friends, Dr. Tom, brought his little girl, Rosalind, who we've mentioned on the show before, who is just over 2. And she turned up and Tom put a lab coat on her and she looked absolutely adorable walking around in this little oversized lab coat. But mainly we had like 3-year-old to like 8 or 9-year-old kids, so we were lying to them about.
So it was very, very young kids, which it's okay to lie to very young kids about cancer, mutation, and Santa.
It's okay. No, but the thing is, so you have to. You clearly disagree. I think when it comes to teaching them about DNA in that situation, you've got to make it fun and interesting, and they're not going to remember anything you tell them on this one day where they've gone around 8 other different stalls. They've made like cookies and eaten sweets. And you've given them cake, and they don't remember the actual science of it, but they might remember the odd word here or there.
They might remember that science was fun.
Yeah, exactly. So you've just got to make it
even
fun
if it was lies.
and interesting.
I'm on board with fun and interesting.
Eventually, they will learn that. Well, okay, so that was not quite true, but the core basis of it, like we were teaching some of the kids about what DNA is and how it works, and it obviously like makes you like loads of the kids wanted to make the normal DNA of making the DNA that would give you blue eyes or whatever.
I just think, to be intellectually honest, you should have given at least one of those kids cancer.
That's not how that works.
Is there a different way you could have phrased that, Marsh? Or was that specifically phrased for that?
It's the only way to be intellectually honest.
Okay.
If you had to give one of those kids cancer, which one would it have been? Obviously not our friends' kids.
All of the kids were very cute and very polite and very lovely.
So you're saying it would have had to been random. You couldn't have selected one out. It would have to be names in a hat.
We did have some parents who were using it as a teaching skill as well. So we had a little boy who came who had Asperger's syndrome, and his dad was trying to explain to him with some difficulty that DNA relates to the condition that he has, which was quite interesting. So it was a cool day.
Marsh, you been up to anything fun?
I've been watching some films recently.
Films?
I went to cinema to see Baby Driver.
Baby Driver?
Baby Driver, the new Edgar Wright film.
I was going to say I've heard about that, but then I realised I've heard about it from you.
Yeah,
so.
I told you last night.
Yeah.
It's amazing. People should go and see it. I won't say too much about it, but it's worth going to see. It's absolutely amazing. It's really good.
Is
Kind of a heist.
it a baby driving?
It's not a Baby Driver. This isn't a follow-up to Boss Baby, which was also... It wasn't like one of those situations where Ants and A Bug's Life came out at the same time, and Boss Baby and Baby Driver came out at the same time.
Boss Baby is Mike.
Yeah, Boss Baby seems to be based on the exploits of me as a child.
Yeah,
from the
I can
poster.
see that. I could well and truly see that.
Apart from the lack of it's not a red tie, it's a different coloured tie, but otherwise,
Well,
Boss Baby is Mike.
They can take some
Artistic license.
artistic license with the character, can't they? You know, it's only based on a true story rather than a direct factual.
But see, Baby Driver, it's he's a getaway driver, but it's very, very good. It's very stylized.
And he's a baby?
Stuff. No, he's just very baby-faced. So he gets called Baby all the way through.
A baby-faced getaway driver.
He's just very, very young.
Which is not as exciting a title, really, the baby-faced getaway driver.
No, that would have been a bit weird. Yeah. But it's really worth going to see. It's excellent. The other film I saw recently isn't worth seeing, and it was Split, the M. Night Shyamalan film.
Oh, he's a bloody useless twat. Well, I mean, I don't think I've seen anything he's done since Unbreakable. Because
Unbreakable was probly the last okay film he did. I didn't think it was terrible. It got pretty bad reviews. But
I think I saw The Sixth Sense and was kind of like, oh, that's, the twisty thing. And then Unbreakable, so another twisty thing. And then the fucking Village came out, or whether it was
Yeah, The Village was bad. Have you seen any of these M. Night Shyamalan films?
Were they the ones Mike's just
They
said?
were the ones.
Yes,
Yes, you've seen all of it. But you haven't seen Split.
No, I have not seen
So
Split.
James McAvoy is in it. And James McAvoy is very, very good. But he plays someone with dissociative identity disorder. Split personality is what they would have used to call it. And so he's got 23 personalities in him. 23. And he abducts... I'm going to spoil the entire film because if listeners don't want to know what happens in this film...
Okay.
But it's not worth watching, so don't worry about it. And it's been out for about a year or so.
But spoilers anyway.
So he kidnaps these 3 girls, and he's keeping them in like a bunker. And like his different personalities keep coming to him. So one's like a scared 9-year-old boy, and the other's like a very prim, uptight English lady, and then another's like an American, like slightly psychopath kind of guy. And he's like he acts physically different around them. And so that's all. If split personalities are really a thing, if DID is a real thing, and I've seen some equivocation as to how legitimate it is in the sense that these are distinct personalities. But if it's a thing, then he's not doing too badly. Then his psychiatrist says about how one of his personalities has diabetes, but the others don't.
Right.
Yeah, so that one needs
not
insulin.
how biology works.
That's not. But I said this to someone. I think we might have been you, Mike. And you said, "Well, what if that personality was the one who took the insulin? So all of them were diabetic, but that was one that took the insulin.
One of them took the insulin, so the others didn't think they were diabetic.
Yeah, but that's not how it's played. And then later they talk about someone else who had entirely different physiology depending on which character they were, which personality was at the fore. And later they talked about a woman who was blind, but one of her personalities wasn't blind. And you're like, okay, so there's a mental blockage which is preventing her brain from processing the signal, but it's a purely psychological blockage rather than a physical one. No, because the psychiatrist says, and when she's that personality, it starts to heal her optic nerves. So that's bollocks then. No. So there's a lot of kind of bollocks flying around, a lot of pseudoscience bollocks flying around on this. And then all the way through, we follow this one main girl who's been abducted. And we see in flashbacks of her life, and we see how she was like abused by her uncle, and then her dad died. And you thought, there's lots of trauma. And they talk about how with him, trauma split is what's responsible for him having these different personalities. So I'm thinking, I can see where this is going. I think she's a split personality as well. He didn't abduct 3 girls. He abducted one girl. Oh, amazing. It's not that. It's not that, because there are definitely 3 girls there. And he starts killing them and stuff. So, okay.
That might have been an interesting twist.
I thought that would have been a really interesting twist. But no. And then I thought, what if he's one of her personalities? She's actually the one abducted them, because the way it was framed when they got abducted was a bit weird, and she was a bit all outside and wasn't good friends with them.
Sure.
What if he's just aspects of her personality, and she's like Tyler Durdening it, sort of looking on to what she's doing, and that she's the abductor? No, wasn't that either. It turns out that he has 24 personalities. The 24th is called the Beast. And the 24th is super strong and super fast and can climb walls with his fingertips. Because he's taken on the personalities and spirits of all of the animals at the local zoo. And so he starts hunting them down and chasing
Okay.
the girls down and like eating them and climbing the walls with his fingertips. And he goes to kill the main character, and then he spots that she's got self-harm scars and says, "Oh, you've suffered too, so you're pure, so I'm not going to kill you." And then he runs away, and he's like super, super fast, super strong. And then it's a report of him on TV, and it's a news report, and they're saying about how because of the way he's got dissociative identity disorder and all these different people within him, police are calling him the Horde. Oh, the other thing I didn't mention is as he's trying to attack her, she shoots him with a shotgun twice, and it doesn't penetrate his skin. Because he's super strong.
Because he's the beast.
And then
He's the beast at the time.
He's a beast. So he's looking at himself in the mirror later, and he's like picking bits of the shell off his skin and says, like, the more I think I am what I think I am, I can become what I think I am, or something like that, to suggest that when he's the beast, he's impenetrable. And so the police report says, because he's got all these personalities in him, he's known as the Horde. They've given him the nickname the Horde. And it's at a diner when this report's on, and a lady is sat at the diner, the counter, saying, "That reminds me a bit of... who was that guy 15 years ago who killed all those people? The police gave him a nickname as well." And then she sits back, and Bruce Willis is at the diner counter, and he says, "That was the Glass Man. He was the Glass Man." And it's the end. And the twist of the whole film was this was a sequel to Unbreakable. But it's the last 10 seconds of the film that twist is revealed. And it's a woo, bollocks, pseudoscience thrown into all this kind of thing. But the big twist is it's a follow-up to Unbreakable.
Excellent.
This film from 15 years ago that people have forgot existed. And apparently there's another film coming out in the series now, and it's a trilogy.
Wow.
What a waste of my fucking life it was watching that.
That sounds bollocks.
Yeah, total
Sounds
bollocks. Total bollocks.
But as I say, we're in Alice's flat today. So on my way over to Alice's flat, I listened to the new Ask an Archaeologist podcast from PJ and Duncan McGarity.
Yes, yep.
So Paul Duncan McGarity, who Alice and I saw at Edinburgh, and then we invited him to QED, and we did Merseyside Skeptics with him. So
Good fella.
we like Paul.
Good podcast.
I enjoyed the show. Yeah, it was season 1, episode 1,
Nice.
which is,
Origin stories. Did he get bitten by a radioactive fossil?
So there's a lot of him in
he
there.
doesn't deal with fossils. Oh, he was seething in that one.
There's a lot of him in there saying, this is what I do, and this is my job, and this is what the show's going to be like, and kind of setting up the structure of the show. But I really enjoyed the show. It was quite good.
Oh, nice.
So the structure of his show is that you ask an archaeologist, you write in and you send him a question, and it can be a silly question or it can be a serious question or whatever. Interestingly, the title of the show is not Ask an Archaeologist about archaeology.
Okay, so you'll ask him anything. So what should we get our listeners to ask him?
I think he probably prefers if you ask about archaeology.
I think all of our listeners should ask him a non-archaeology related question. Just episode 2, he's like, well, we've got another question about golf balls. I don't know why about manufacturing golf balls. I have no idea why all my listeners... I've weirdly skewed this entire podcast around golf ball manufacturing. I don't know. Who'd have thought there was a niche out there?
But I like Paul and I like his stuff, so I wanted to give him a plug on the show. So you can find his stuff. He's up on iTunes, and he's I think he's putting through Podbean as well.
Okay.
And he's on Twitter at Ask an Arc, which I think maybe was a poor choice.
Arc with a K or an arc with a C?
Well, it's Arc with a CH because it's archaeologist.
Ask an arch.
So you either have to say Ask an Arc, and then people think it's a portion of a circle that you are inquiring
like
of.
ask an arch at the end.
Or it could be Ask an Arc as in ask a large boat.
Yeah.
Or it could be Ask an Arch as in, another portion of a circle. There's a lot of circles going on.
Yeah. Or arch as in like archbishop, arch nemesis.
Possibly.
What is arch? What does that mean in that context? The prefix arch. Is it like ultimate? Is it super? Is it
Who knows?
main?
I mean, you're the one with the English degree. I don't know why you're looking at me.
Weirdly, we didn't cover the definition of the word arch in a 3 literature degree. I don't know. It never came. I think I have looked it up once, but I can't remember.
But yeah, so he's asking Arc CH, as in archaeologist, on Twitter, and he's on Facebook as well. So
Well, if we're plugging in the podcast before we get started,
send a
I
question
listened
in
to Citation Needed, which is the latest one from Cognitive Dissonance and the Scathing Atheist guys. And if you like what they do, it's very much what they do. So, yeah, I listened to the first kind of 6 or so episodes of that the other day. That's pretty good fun. They read a Wikipedia page. One of them reads it, and the rest just kind of ask questions about it and just talk about what they've learned on there. But it's just them just shooting off about random things.
Cool.
Yeah, it's kind of worth listening to.
Well, I had a question I wanted to ask Paul McGarity for his thing. So you're meant to send them in via Twitter or Facebook.
Do you think this will count?
But I thought I'll just ask it on our show. and he can answer it on his show.
Okay.
Which assumes that he listens to our show, which may or may not be the case anyway.
Well, we'll find out.
That hasn't gone well historically. He asked Hayley something and she didn't.
Well, you say that.
She does listen
She
to the
starts
show.
listening.
She's just behind. I
Hayley
think.
subsequently got in touch with me and answered our question that we had about. So on episode 200, we asked about scrying.
We did ask about scrying, and I was wrong about it.
You guys said it was some like crystal thing, and I said it was something about putting a mirror in a river. And it turns out that we're both full of shit. Haley initially wrote in and said, "What fucking question?" I said, "Episode 200." She was, "Oh, okay." So she's written in and told me what scrying is. So scrying is where you use a mirror, use a reflective surface, and you stand, you look at this reflective surface, and you stare at the reflective surface for a long time. You'll maybe light a candle in the room with you, and you stare for a long time. And eventually you kind of start to hallucinate, and your face goes kind of weird, and you see like mad supernatural shit going on. Some people do run water down the mirror, which is where I think I got the river thing from. Some people run water down the mirror to improve that kind of distortion.
I think Alice does, but that's only because she left the taps on.
Effect that you...
Was this your question to Paul Duncan McGarity? Because it's a really weird...
No,
So your question to Paul Duncan McGarity is Haley right about scrying?
This is an absurd aside,
Okay.
But she said it was...
Absurd aside is when you kill a surrealist.
But she said there have been studies into scrying by Giovanni Caputo, who in one study had 50 people stare at their reflection, and the majority of them reported seeing weird things.
I have heard of this, yeah. You start seeing like your face being distorted, I think.
Yeah, and he referred to this as dissociative identity effect. Close to dissociative. So we'll just bring that back into Split there.
See?
It all links.
It all ties together accidentally.
It's as if we planned this. And
we didn't plan this. I was still writing my story less than an hour ago, and we've been recording for 20 minutes.
That's true.
And I cycled here.
But she said it's where our facial recognition system starts to misfire and we get kind of hallucinations. So that's what scrying is.
Nice.
So given our limited success at asking questions on this show and expecting other people to respond to them, which is not how listener questions work.
No.
Questions shouldn't be to listeners. They should be from
listeners to answer on a different show. We should just try this every week with a different podcast and just see who listens to us.
But my question...
So my question is to Adnan Syed. Did you do it?
Well, my question to Paul McGarity is, so if you can answer this on your show, Paul, I'd much appreciate it, because we've just given you a big plug, and Haley as well, but okay. How much of archaeology is science and how much of it is pseudoscience? How much of it is evidence-led and how much of it is just so stories of kind of like, oh, there was a series of small walls and therefore there was a village here and people and you're just making shit up? And how much of it is actually evidence-led and supported by evidence? Because, of course, we're a skeptical podcast. We've got to have the skeptical theme question.
I hope it just tweets back a 2-digit number with a percentage after it. Yeah, it's a 42%, Mike.
42% pseudoscience.
Yeah.
But yes, that's my question for Paul McGarity. And if you want to hear the answer to my question, go and subscribe to Paul McGarity's podcast, and it may or may not turn up on a future episode of his show.
It might be just after all the hundreds of questions he's going to answer about golf balls first.
So for my first appearance, when I'm not full of Kendall mint cake liqueur, I thought I'd ambitiously try to impersonate all of you at the same time.
Okay.
In some kind of weird hostile takeover.
Okay.
Can you do a bad Geordie accent? Because that'll cover two of us.
No, I can do a good Scottish accent, but I'm not going to do it on this.
But maybe a future show.
But you did it on the Edinburgh Skeptics podcast.
That's because I was in Scotland.
Okay, is that how it works?
We've recorded this show in my kitchen. We've recorded it in Alice's. The next one we have to record is in Edinburgh.
In Scotland.
Therefore,
so Emma can do the accent. I see.
Yes, so to impersonate the three of you, obviously, Marsh talks about PR a lot and press shenanigans when Mike isn't banging on about conspiracy theories like he does all of the time.
Constantly.
He's generally going through scientific papers, reviewing them to see what's wrong with them, and obviously Alice talks about sex all the time. Can't shut her up about it. So...
That's not even on Mike either. That's just literally constantly.
I mean, that was a really awkward christening.
So how can I combine all of those? So there was an article in the Daily Mail on the 24th of June, 2017.
Good start on Skeptics with a K.
Excellent start. Obviously, it's a Daily Mail headline, so strap in. It says the scandal of the sex crime cure hubs. How Minister buried report into a £100 million prison programme to treat paedophiles and rapists that increased reoffending rates. Okay.
Increased rates?
Increased, right. So that's just the first part. There's still some bullet points.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Long.
You're just taking a breather.
Yeah. So it's sex offender treatment programme is psychological group therapy course. believed to have cost the taxpayers over 100 million since it was set up in 1991. Prisoners who take the rehabilitation course are at least 25% more likely to be convicted of further sex crimes than those who do not. Paedophiles convicted of attacking children are especially likely to offend again.
Blimey, so we've been subsidising paedophilia.
At least that's what the article appears to suggest. Obviously, I am a prison law solicitor. I specialise in representing people in relation to parole hearings and things like that, which is how I've where my knowledge of this comes from. The Sex Offender Treatment Programme, which is called SOTP, and it's a course that's been used in UK prisons for over 20 years to try and address the reasons that people commit offences, to try and stop them from doing it, because ideally you want people who've committed such offences not to do it again.
It's a shame they couldn't have just worked that acronym a little harder, because it's so close to stop which would have been all right.
There is a course called Stop.
Oh, right.
But it's not related to sex offenders.
Is that promoting people? That's actually promoting something.
So obviously sex offenders aren't generally very popular.
No.
Generally disliked is probably the...
Do they like each other?
Well, it depends. It depends on their stance in relation to their offence. If they maintain their innocence of it, then they're all awful. But and then some of them will give hierarchies to their offence. They'll say, "Well, mine's not as bad as this thing, but something happened like that."
Blimey, okay. I'm not going to dig any further because that's going to get grim very quickly when you start talking about the hierarchies.
And they all have to live together because the general prison, whilst the general population obviously don't generally like sex offenders, prisoners who aren't sex offenders really, really don't like prisoners who are sex offenders, to the extent that there are lots of prisons that are specific sex offender prisons and sex offender wings. They have to be kept separate from the general population, otherwise they would get attacked all of the time.
Oh, God.
Generally. And to highlight that, I've brought as a copy of the prison paper, there's an article here from an inmate at HMP Liverpool. They've just found out that their blankets are made by the prisoners in HMP Stafford, and HMP Stafford is one of these prisons that's pure sex offender, and they're not very happy about that at all. It was in the Liverpool Echo a few days ago as well.
Really? Blimey.
Yeah.
So this is why you've come with props?
Yes, that's why I've come with props. It's not very good for a podcast, I realise, but I thought everyone else might want to look at it. But the
this is the good prison paper, isn't it?
This is the Inside Time, which is the equivalent of a broadsheet. It's the equivalent of the Guardian or the Times.
Yeah,
but there are a few
for prisoners.
But for prisoners, yeah.
Okay.
So it's circulated prison.
So like the News of the World.
UK-wide. Yeah.
Because I didn't even know this was a thing, that prison newspapers, that they had special prison... I mean, I thought they might have prison newsletters, like Orange is the New Black, where they all go around and write subversive literature.
Right,
and
okay.
You know, make cartoons where their prison counsellors are portrayed by walruses and things like that. I thought that might be a thing. But this is a proper printed newspaper.
And some of them have higher circulations than normal papers, because normal newsprint, no one reads normal newspapers, but the prisoners can't get access to the internet, so they're still
theoretically
reading the
they can't get into it. They're not meant to.
Theoretically, never mind that.
That's incredible, though.
Yeah, they found 20,000 mobile phones in prisons last year.
Yeah, and 225 kilograms of drugs, which just says that they haven't been finding all of the drugs. So they haven't been finding the majority of the drugs. So how many tons of drugs are knocking about?
Maybe we can talk about that another time. Anyway,
I think we definitely should.
The paper I have here is the equivalent of The Guardian, but there are a number of other ones, including one called Converse, which is, I would say, the equivalent of like the Sun newspaper.
Okay.
And the firm that I work for advertise in that newspaper.
Right, so you're regularly in The Sun.
I am regularly in The Sun. I'm on page 3 of The Sun. The firm has a full-page advert on page 3 of every edition of that newspaper with my face.
Right. Good.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Nice.
Just my face.
But even the prison version of The Sun is classy enough not to have a model, a topless model on page 3. They have a solicitor.
Yeah, they wouldn't be allowed that anyway.
No.
Especially not sex offenders. So back on target.
Back onto the story, yeah. Always back around to sex offenders.
Because also, obviously, I haven't read under the line on that Daily Mail article, but I assume that the comments are something along the lines of that the way that we should deal with sex offenders is removing their genitals and or stringing them up, or some form of punishment in that way. Now,
just to be clear, you mean stringing the sex offender up, not the genitals. Yeah. Like, remove the genitals and string them up, like in old-fashioned meat larders, where they just have like rabbits and other games just hanging up to dry.
Possibly so.
Just be that, but with cocks.
Yeah. So I'm going to assert that that's not the best way to deal with it. I'm happy to defend that another time, but generally I think the best thing to do is to rehabilitate people rather than to
Bleeding heart
execute
liberal.
them all.
Yeah. Bleeding heart liberal. You would not be able to make much money on Patreon with views like that.
So as I said, I represent people in parole hearings, so I obviously represent sometimes sex offenders at parole hearings, and in order to be released by the parole board, you have to prove to them that that your risk of committing a serious offence, of causing serious harm, is reduced to the point that it can be managed in the community, right? And the main way that you do that in this context is to do this SOTP course. And I've had lots of clients who were delayed in release for a long time because there aren't enough staff or facilities to do the course properly, wait years to do it, before they could be released.
Okay, so, I mean, that's something that's worth unpicking for a second. So you have people who are ready for release if they do this course, but they're kept back for years because there isn't the facility. Presumably that's funding-based. There isn't the funding to have enough people
It's funding and staff and space.
Yeah, I mean, how much does it cost to run the course, and how much does it cost to keep people in prison for a couple of years?
I'm not sure exactly how much it costs per person for the course, but it certainly costs more to keep them in prison for a year than to run them on the course.
Oh, that's good then.
But that's assuming the course works. We have to get
true.
that.
Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, it might be a saving grace that they haven't been giving this pro-paedophilia course.
This is the course that the Daily Mail says actually increases your risk of. So you're fine to be go once we have increased your risk of reoffending. Okay.
Yeah. So, and you can only do that course at all if you admit you're guilty. If you maintain your innocence, you're not allowed to do the course.
Right.
Which makes it nigh on impossible to be released, because how do you prove you've reduced risk if you've got no way of if you've just been sitting in prison doing nothing? How do you prove you're less dangerous?
Yeah, I mean, you could say that I haven't committed a sexual offence for how long I've been here now? For weeks. It's been weeks.
What day since last incident?
Just on the wall, just changing the little number cards.
Yeah, and because a lot of people assume that that denial means more risky, which is not. The literature doesn't say that, but again, I don't have time to get into that specifically. Anyway, so I'm not trying to make you feel sorry for sex offenders, but generally speaking, if we're going to make them do something, we want them to be less dangerous after they've done it.
Yes, yeah.
For the good of society.
That's a good idea.
So back to the Daily Mail article. The first paragraph of it is that the government is hiding a devastating report that shows rehabilitation courses taken by thousands of jailed rapists and paedophiles make them more dangerous once they are released. So there was a suggestion that the government had done a study that showed that it was more dangerous, but they weren't doing anything about it. Because of the investment and the cost of the courses that had already run. Now, towards the start of the year, we'd started getting rumblings in the sort of parole world that there was something not quite right. The MOJ had something, and I had sort of conversations with psychologists who'd sort of reviewed the data and stuff, who thought that it didn't work. But as late as April, the Ministry of Justice was saying that it does work, and that was after they'd obtain this data, this secret data we don't know about yet.
Right, okay. So they may well have data proving that it doesn't work, but they were denying that and were actually doubling down at the time.
Yeah, and they weren't releasing it. And then quite promptly around April time, they announced that they weren't going to do the SOTP course anymore. No explanation, we're just dropping it now. And at that point, about 1,000 people were on it or waiting to start it. And we're not doing it anymore. There's about 11,000 sex offenders in total in prison. Presumably, but not conclusively, because of that Daily Mail article and because of negative press and concerns about that, the government then did publish this impact evaluation that they had got put together at the start of the year. And it was published on the 30th of June. And the aim of that was to, quote, extend the evidence base on the effectiveness of treatment for sexual offenders. This study measures the impact of the prison-based SOTP on reoffending outcomes for sex offenders in England and Wales, whilst controlling for the different observable characteristics, needs and risk factors of offenders. So it wasn't it is a paper, but it's not like an RCT or anything like that. They say that in the paper. They say, really, we should be doing RCTs. But this is the best that we've got, is what they say in the paper.
Can they explain why they aren't doing RCTs? I suppose because you can't put some sex offenders on the course and some
you can't,
and then see which ones go off and commit offences in the future.
So the evaluation itself, they had two broad groups of people. They had people who had done the course and people who hadn't done the course. Obviously.
Yeah. I mean, that defines everyone.
Yeah, everyone.
on a broad enough scale, that is literally everyone.
So people who were convicted of sex offences.
Okay, that narrows it down somewhat. Yeah.
So in the group of who had done the course, there was 2,562 people who had done the course from 2000 to 2012, and 13,219 who hadn't. And they hadn't for a variety of reasons. They were maintaining innocence. There wasn't space on the course. They refused to do it. They got released before they had time to do it, all kinds of reasons. And it was reviewed from 2002, when the first of those would have been released, to 2015 to see if they were convicted of another offence. And they also split them up into they tried to match them to each other, because obviously there's different kinds of sex offence and different factors and stuff, and they tried to match them together.
So you want people who've committed very similar offences, so you've got a good comparison. It's not like this person was a serial offender of a certain subsection of society, and we're matching to someone who's one thing one offence somewhere. Okay.
And so that was what they did. And then so there were two sort of what they saw as statistically significant key findings, that people who were treated were more likely to commit a sexual offence than those who weren't treated. And so it was 8% of people who weren't treated went on to commit an offence, and 10% of people who were treated went on to commit an offence.
But there's a massive selection bias in there, though. A massive selection bias, because you have to have admitted guilt to be on the course in the first place. So in the not on the course group, there will be some innocent people who obviously are not going to go on to reoffend because they didn't offend in the first place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I mean, obviously, it's hard to quantify how many people who are convicted of a sexual offence are innocent. But is there anything to know what level that might be? Is there any indication? We can't put a number directly on it, but presumably there will be some instances where there are people churned up in the system. Is there any way of knowing anything about those people?
Short answer, no.
Okay, gotcha. Fair enough.
Right. So I mean, what Mike raised there is one of the issues that I raised, so I don't have to raise anything. So on the face of it, that's exactly what the Daily Mail says. It increases offence rates, but there are some severe limitations of that. The one that Mike's just raised. Also, the impact evaluation itself highlights the fact that there is a complete lack of high-quality evidence about whether courses work at all. They go as far as to say if you were to exclusively rely on high-quality evidence, there is no evidence of any impact at all for any coursework.
Right, because there isn't the high-quality evidence out there.
And there was a Cochrane review in 2012 which said the same thing. And the independent psychologists that I instruct in relation to my cases have been saying that to me for years, and they say that in reports to the parole board, but the parole board have just generally said no. They've got to do the course.
Right, okay.
Hopefully they're going to change their mind after this. Also, there's issues in terms of reoffending rates are low anyway. 8 and 10% is not a large amount.
Yeah.
I mean, it's too high. You don't want more victims, but it's not a very large amount. So you need very large cohorts and long periods of time.
It's not like in comparison to other crimes where the reoffending rate might be quite high.
Yeah.
So like drug crimes, I think that might be quite high.
The general reoffence rate in that overall, out of all of them, was 38%.
Right, okay.
That was just for sexual offending.
Yeah.
And then also, out of the people who were treated, only 76% of them actually completed the course. 13% of them hadn't finished it, and the rest of them, they didn't have an outcome recorded. So not all of them even did the course. And
are they counted in the numbers of the people who were treated?
Yep.
Okay. That's going to be a big confounding thing as well. Okay.
Yeah, it's going well, isn't it?
So they started the course. They maybe didn't even attend the first day of the course.
Yeah, because they just started.
Yeah. But they're counted as being
you can be registered to start the course, and then you could just turn up to nothing, and you get a non-completed report.
But you're counted as having done the course. Yeah. So you could plausibly be someone who has admitted they've done the crime, got on the course because you need to get on the course, not turned up to any of the course, got out through some other means, and then reoffended because you were someone who wasn't that committed to rehabilitation. You just said you'd do the course. Yeah. And you're going to skew those statistics anyway. Okay.
Yeah. So if things, so obviously we're not quite clear as to how significant or how much we can rely on that evidence. But if it's as bad as it looks, why have they been doing it for so long? They've been doing the course for 20 odd years. There was a study in 2003 who looked at people who'd completed the course before 1996 that suggested that it seemed to have a positive effect.
And that was the first 5 years of it, was it? 'Cause it was 91 to 96.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a lot of things have changed since then. And again, the impact evaluation references this, that they have no way of seeing if any of this relates to poor implementation of the course or changes that have happened since. The prison population has massively increased. They've rolled it out onto a much more industrial scale, so they don't have specialist psychologists doing the work anymore. It's people who go on a course to become facilitators of the course. They're relying on manuals rather than their sort of psychological expert judgment. They're not doing individual tailoring of the course. Group work in general is problematic in a lot of places because it can normalise the behaviour if they're all together. And also a lot of people don't like doing group work because a lot of them will have also been offended against themselves and they have to listen to the offences, or they get aroused by other people talking about their offences and things like that. And they forge connections with one another and things like that. But group work is cheaper than individual therapy.
So, so plausibly, you start in 1991. By 1996, you evaluate the effectiveness, and it looks like it might work. So you now roll it out to a much wider population with much less financial support, with much less expertise administering it, with much less thought about how individual prisoners are going to take part in it. And then you say, it looks like it's not working as well when we don't fund it properly or when we don't have experts running it.
Yep.
Okay.
Basically.
So it's the fault of the course still, though.
Yeah. So the impact evaluation itself says it should form part of the evidence base as to move forward, and they should amend the course in light of what they had found. However, keen to avoid scandal and given the emotive nature of this, the government just decided to drop the course instead. Rather than try and fix anything, they've just said no more SATP. It is no more.
Right.
that stops, say, my clients who are potentially dangerous sex offenders, who are lifers, that stops them being released potentially because they've not done the course and there's nothing to replace it, which isn't good for them, but for society perhaps is good.
Yeah.
But that most people have determinate sentences. They're going to get released regardless. And now you've lost any...
Shit.
Yeah.
Right. So you could be someone who's in for 10 years and you've got the choice of either giving them something that might rehabilitate them or give them nothing so they're not rehabilitated.
Yep. No, but don't worry, because what the government are doing is they've got a new course called Kaizen. Kaizen is a Japanese word for continual improvement. And people might be familiar with it in a business context. It's used as a business word about how you deal with your business. I don't know, I'm not a business person. But that's currently in the works, and no one's actually started it yet. I've got some clients who are doing the initial stages of it, but they haven't actually started running the course. And it's the same kind of course. It's another CBT-based group work course. Positively, people who maintain their innocence can take part in it. So they can still work on things, because the issue is the parole board have to assume you're guilty. So even if you maintain your innocence, you have to try and prove risk reduction without. It's very complicated.
Yeah.
But as skeptics, we all need to be wary of things that claim to cure all ills. And this course is not only replacing sex offender work; it's replacing some of the high intensity violence courses as well.
Right, so they're kind of amalgamating those two crimes to say, presumably, if it's one cause to treat both those, they're assuming that the same treatment can be helpful in both cases of extreme violence and sexual offence, which would presume, I guess, that there is an underlying cause to both things that could be similar, and that seems like a bit of an assumption.
And bearing in mind the issues of the SOTP in terms of it becoming a bit too generic, they're making it even more generic. So that course has been accredited. The official definition is accredited but not evaluated.
So we've rubber stamped it but haven't checked whether it's useful.
Yep. Brilliant.
That's a horrifying glimpse into what's going on. And I suspect you've got plenty more of those in store for us for future appearances.
Unfortunately, yes.
Patients trust friends more than science on drug treatments. 6 in 10 are sceptical of claims made by trials. This was the headline on a piece written by Sophie Borland, who is the health editor for the Daily Mail, published recently. And the whole article goes on to highlight that there's been a study by the Academy of Medical Sciences, and it found that 63% of the public are sceptical of claims made by drug trials, and thus the Academy are calling for the NHS to publish detailed information about the risks and the side effects of treatments, things like that. So the article says... patients are more likely to trust advice from friends about medicines than scientific research. Many have major doubts following a series of scares over the safety of HRT, cholesterol-busting statins, and the antiviral drug Tamiflu. The Academy of Medical Sciences, which carried out a poll, is calling for a major overhaul of the way patients are told about drugs. They want NHS Choice's website to publish detailed information about likely risks and side effects of the most common treatments. And in addition, they're urging GPs to hold longer appointments, particularly with older patients, to discuss any concerns. So this story I thought was quite interesting, and I started to look into it a little bit more. So the Academy of Medical Sciences, they're a pretty solid organisation when you look into them. They've got lots of very credible researchers, academics, doctors. They're all kind of fellows of the Academy. And it's people like Dame Sally Davis, who's the UK's Chief Medical Officer. So they're no slouches. This is a really respectable body. And the report they've written seems really legit. I had a good look through. And according to the Daily Mail, it says the Academy surveyed 2,041 members of the public and 1,013 GPs about attitudes toward medical research. 37% of the public said they trust evidence from medical research, and 65% said they trust it instead from friends and family.
Only 37% trust medical. Jesus Christ.
Well, I mean, it's not a surprise when the papers are full of this causes cancer or that cures cancer or this science is wrong and that.
I had hope that it really wasn't that bad, though. 37%, that's nothing.
There's some really interesting stuff in here, and they kind of dig into that a little bit. But it also says, surprisingly, 82% of GPs said they believed medical research was biased in favour of drugs appearing effective and safe. 82% of GPs. So I looked at the original report. Obviously, I didn't just go by the Daily Mail's version. And first of all, I want to see how the survey participants were chosen. And I'm pleased to say it wasn't a multiple-choice, one-poll pseudo-study. The original report says, ComRes interviewed 2,041 members of the British public online between the 18th and 20th of March.
Sorry, how many people?
2,041. And 1,013 GPs online between the 16th and 26th of March. The general public data was weighted to be nationally representative of all British adults aged 18 and over by age, gender, region and socio-economic group. Comrades, when you look into them, they're pretty respectable in the market research industry. They're not one poll, they're pretty decent. The results of all their work are represented in the 116-page summary published by the Academy. So it's really detailed, all the information out there. And they outline some of their key findings in here. They found that there were concerns that research wasn't always conducted on populations that represent the groups for whom medicines are being recommended. And this is some of the stuff that came up with GPs. So when the GPs, 82% of GPs are saying that they think medical research might be biased towards showing a drug to be effective, that's the type of concern they're looking at. So it's a bit more nuanced than this thing is bullshit.
And it is an issue. Like we don't test medicines on the right groups of people. We hardly ever test medicines on women, for example, because they're too variable and have
emotions in it.
Lots of different aspects of their physiology can interfere with drugs. Never mind the fact that those drugs are then given to women as treatments. They should also be tested on women, but the number of trials that don't is...
And you also find a lot of like medical trials target ideal patient groups.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so exclude people from the trials who might have confounding factors that in real life is going to make a real difference, but you want the kind of... So there's a legitimate thing there. Patients also said they were seen as being recipients of care rather than taking an active role in learning about the nature of that care or asking the healthcare professionals questions. That came up on both sides, both the GP and the public, saying people just think you do what the doctor says rather than take an active role. They also highlighted that patients and the public have a lack of familiarity with the process of generating scientific evidence, leading some to perceive personal experiences as being more reliable than scientific evidence. And this is something we as skeptics come across all the time, and it's something that obviously needs to be tackled. There was also low awareness among patients and the public of different types of study designs and their purpose, and that evidence continues to be generated once a medicine is available on the market. So people just didn't know what types of studies are out there, what one type of study meant, which one's the most reliable, that kind of thing. It was confusing to people. There's also limited appreciation among patients and the public of the uncertainty inherent in research findings, and so the error bars basically, and the applicability of your results to different groups of patients. So they weren't quite sure about that kind of thing. And that overall, they believed that medicines that were available on the market were safe and effective for everyone. They didn't realise there were sort of drawbacks in certain populations. And so they found that the challenge for some healthcare professionals, there was a challenge in assessing the quality of the evidence as relevant to their own practice as well. So specific healthcare professionals themselves were struggling to evaluate the data. That wasn't where their kind of their strengths were lying. So the author of the report was Professor John Tuck, who's former president of the Academy, and he said it's starting to hear that only a third of the public trust medical research. Patients are struggling to make sense of the information they receive from the doctor, the TV, the internet, and their friends and family about medicines. And they highlighted things like patient information leaflets. So you get the leaflets that come with each of the drugs that you get. They found that they were described by the public as being impenetrable and unreadable. And they called for a substantial change to the leaflets on a national and EU level. And that's pretty fair. If you try and read your way through one of those, if you're a layperson, I think they are. I'm not sure I've ever spent a lot of time reading them. But
well, that's the main problem, that they're dense. It's not that necessarily that I don't think the language is particularly impenetrable, but they're impenetrable because it's a lot of information on you've been given antibiotics for an infection that you've got, and you just want to take the drug. You don't want to read you don't want to read the information. Also, not helped by the fact that if you do read the information, like every drug is going to kill you because they have to put everything.
Yeah,
like they have to put all the risks on. So even the things that are very unlikely to happen, they will put on there. So,
and we see that a lot when it comes to people who are vaccine deniers, the anti-vaccination movement. They will highlight all of the potential side effects that are listed about a vaccine.
And some they might have only happened to one person, and they can't be. There's no evidence that it's related to the drug. It might just be that person had that reaction whilst they were taking this drug, but they have to put it on the list.
And I think there's just a complete failure of communication going on there.
Yeah.
In that the anti-vax people can use that list of reported side effects to say this is what the drug does, and how many people in the public really understand where that list of side effects is generated, where those different things come from, what the magnitude or the likelihood or the probability of each of those kind of things. So I think there is a genuine issue there. Dame Sally Davies, the Chief Medical Officer, said, "It's vital that we find the best possible way to use and communicate scientific evidence so that progress may be translated into benefits for patients." So first off, I want to say that I think this is a really good report. When you read through the actual report itself, it's a good report. It's a really great initiative.
Yeah.
They've got a whole site. They've got their 116-page report on the Academy of Medical Science, but they've also got a separate site that's set up to summarise it and give it kind of in a very lay-friendly way. There's little 2-minute videos explaining various different things. It's a really well sort of communicated idea, I think.
116 pages?
Yeah.
How long's your thesis, Alice?
189 pages.
189 pages. Okay, right. So fuck you, Sally Davis.
That's the only reason you were asking that, was it? To see whether Alice has written more than Sally?
Has written more than Sally Davis, yes.
Okay, fine.
Yeah. Ever in her career, presumably. So I'm sure Sally Davis is lovely. I'm
sure she's done a lot of other stuff.
I'm just being a deliberate dickhead because we're in Alice's flat, and that's what we do when we're allowed to do that.
When we're recording in Sally Davies' flat, we can be nice to Sally Davies. It's fine.
And insult Alice.
Exactly.
Apparently.
We will. And Sally Davies on her podcast now.
It's not like I would normally be carrying my thesis around with me. It is purely because we're in the flat that I have the answer to that question.
Yeah, you say that. This whole study, the whole point of this study really is it's trying to educate the public about the need for, as they actually put it in one of their videos, robust, reliable, and relevant evidence. And that's what they're actually trying to approach the public with. Mm-hmm. It's not saying necessarily that people mistrust doctors and that there is this kind of mistrust out there. It's the idea is to try and identify and then tackle that problem.
Absolutely, yeah.
Both in reaching out to the public and also speaking to doctors, also speaking to researchers to say we need to collaborate together here to make sure that people understand the need for robust, reliable and relevant evidence. It's calling for better involvement of patients and carers in research so that the research actually addresses the specific priorities of the patients. So when it comes to actually designing things, not just look at the outcomes that the researchers themselves are looking at, but also what does this mean? What do patients need to know about this? So that information is already available. I think that's a really good idea. They're looking at better training in statistics for researchers. That's one of the things they're calling for, so that researchers can find out better ways of conveying statistical information in a way that the public can actually understand. How do you reach out to the public better? And they're looking for support in designs of new studies on new study design techniques in order to capitalize on emerging technology. So things like wearable technology. How can we use Fitbits and other types of wearable devices to gain better data on patients that will provide a much better, rounder, clearer picture of things?
I know that's a big initiative that Apple is pushing with their Health Kit framework.
Exactly.
Which is built into every iPhone and every Apple Watch, which means it can gather real-time health data anonymously.
As long as it is anonymous, unlike that sex toy company who had an app linked to their sex toy. And
well, one of the things Apple have done is they deliberately add random noise to the data to ensure that it is properly anonymized using some technique that they described that I don't remember the name of, but they publish the data anonymously like that, so you can't mine the data and find patterns because there's actually randomness in there to kind of put you off from being able to wind it down, but the randomness should even out across groups, so it will be fine. But they described it in great detail and had some fantastic statisticians come in and design it for them. But
did they describe it in an academically published paper?
The technique is from an academically published paper, although Apple described it in a video on stage at a product launch.
Yeah, with some fireworks probably. But fireworks and a black turtleneck.
It's an interesting new approach to medical research that you don't have to take a cohort to be representative of a population. You could, in principle, with the technology we have today, study every member of the population simultaneously. In principle. In practice, that's not where we're quite at yet.
Some people don't have iPhones.
In principle, that's somewhere that we can actually go.
A lot of prisoners do.
So one of the other things they're talking about, again, they said they're trying to push for the Academy of Medical Science here. They're pushing for better clarity on communicating information. They said they want accessible, accessible, and usable information. That's one of the outcomes they want from research now, to make sure that that's a priority for researchers.
I think accessible information is a big deal as well.
But also accessible. They're saying accessible and accessible.
Yes.
So how do you actually understand this kind of stuff? And they also, one of the things they released was a list of questions that patients could ask their doctor in order to be better informed, in order to be able to have that kind of collaborative conversation. And the questions are really good. It's things like, is this medicine right for me? What does it do? How will it help me? How certain are you that it will help me? What are the potential benefits of this medicine? What are the risks? Is it a tried and tested medicine? How will this medicine make me feel? What are the side effects? How will it affect my day-to-day life? How long should I take it for? Can I take it with other meds? And that type of stuff, really. So, and how should I take it? So that's really, really good stuff. So overall, I think this is a really good report. But I think there's also a lot of other stuff going on here. So you've got the fact that 82% of GPs believe that the medical research is biased towards favouring the drug and showing the drug to be effective. And that's a real issue here. And it's the kind of thing that we saw in Ben Goldacre's book, Bad Pharma, which is a book that I think you stand by, Mike, and you think is a fantastic book.
100%
Any problems with Bad Pharma?
Yeah, I've not even read Bad Pharma.
Well, it outlines a lot of it. It is a really great book.
It's on my bookshelf. I just haven't got around to it yet, because when the fuck do I get the time to sit down and read something, Christ?
Yeah. But in that, I mean, that book talks about Tamiflu. This report talks about Tamiflu and how there was data on the effectiveness of Tamiflu that was withheld and was massaging the numbers. And these are issues that, if the pharmaceutical companies continue acting in this kind of way, they're going to continue having a low level of trust from doctors and a low level of trust from the public. But thinking out, so that's the actual report itself, and I think the report's great. Let's go back to the Daily Mail report on it. How useful is the headline they put on that report? Knowing that that's what the report's all about, how doctors and researchers can collaborate together with the public to convey the effectiveness of medicines better, to have a much better communication strategy, and to produce better quality research that people can actually understand. The headline they went with in the Mail was, "Patients trust friends more than science on drug treatment. 6 in 10 are skeptical of the claims of trials." Is that a fair take-home about the report? Is that the top line about the report? Surely the top line about this report is doctors call for better communication, better transparency. But no, it's that people trust friends better than science. Well, to show that the media have totally missed the point of this, here are some of the comments that were below the Daily Mail article.
Okay.
We had Prepet from Nepal said, "The wisdom of the people is weeding out junk science." That is not what this report is saying.
No.
That is not what the report is saying at all. We had Ray from the UK saying, "Just Google GlaxoSmithKline find in the USA. It tells you all you need to know." No, it doesn't. You haven't understood what this report's all about. Someone from Portsmouth said, "Of course, 6 out of 10 are skeptical of studies. We know that they are funded by and biased towards the companies involved." And a chap from Scotland said, "There is no truth in anything we are told today. Everything we hear is for personal gain."
Including that.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's just so fucking frustrating that the angle the media have taken on this, they've put a spin into this story that it doesn't need to be there, and it's what people are taking away.
Yeah.
This is a story about better communication, and the media are badly communicating it and fucking the whole thing up. Even if we accepted that the media's point and that the Daily Mail's point on this was right, and that people are skeptical of studies, it's really fucking rich of them. You know, why do they think patients aren't trusting studies? Well, let's pick out a few of the things from the Mail's recent health section. Headline, "Are you guilty of texting too much? Just 5 hours on a mobile phone increases the risk of carpal tunnel syndrome." That's June 22nd. And it opens saying, "It's the latest affliction caused by smartphones after text, neck and shoulder pain. Scientists have found that 5 hours a day on smartphones and tablets may increase the risk of developing carpal tunnel syndrome." You read this, it's research from the Hong Kong Polytechnic University, involving a self-reported questionnaire of 48 students.
48 students.
48 students. Is that really enough, robust enough, to make a headline in the health section of a national newspaper on the other side of the world? And then they go on, they say the authors state one explanation is that the design of input requires repetitive finger movements, clicking, scrolling, and that has a muscular effect. It says it follows warnings from back and neck specialists that children as young as 7 are suffering from text neck, spending so much time on their mobile phones, stooped over their tablets, that their spine can be pushed more than an inch out of alignment. Can you remember that story?
I don't remember that story, actually.
I think I covered on the show. Those neck and shoulder experts were the British Chiropractic Association.
Yeah.
This was a press release put out by the BCA.
Yeah.
It was a one-poll study where they asked parents, how long are your kids using their phones for, and do your kids ever have back problems? And this is just a press release. So we have a press release from Quacks presented as being on par with findings from university, and even those findings probably need more scrutiny. But none of that is put through in the media coverage. It's just the sensationalist headlines. Here's another one. Stepping into the ring is the best way to shed the pounds. Boxing burns more calories than running gym workouts, and sex. It's another health story, this time explaining
Also
that
leads to
boxing...
brain damage.
Well, yeah, but this is just... well, that's true. But it's another health story, this time explaining that boxing burns more calories than sex, which shouldn't be a surprise to us. But the media have propagated the myth that sex is the best exercise out there for burning calories. But boxing, it should be clearly more physical exercise. Boxing involves 2 people going at each other intensely for up to 3 minutes, whereas sex... All right, bad example. But if sex was as strenuous a workout as boxing, most people would be in much better shape. A lot more people have sex than a boxing. But even that story has very dubious roots because, as it says here, stepping into the ring is the best way to shed the pounds, a new survey has revealed. Survey. And it says the results are from a survey of healthy men and women who recorded how many calories they were burning while doing a range of physical activities. So people were recording how many calories. This wasn't any way that they were being measured. This was self-reported. You might wonder how they were measuring the calories. You can go fuck yourself. The article doesn't mention it. No idea. It's just a list here. Yeah, exactly. It says the results are from a new survey by the health and well-being brand Forza Supplements, and this is an advert for Woo supplements listed under the health section as if it was a study. We see this all the time. There's another one. A supermarket shopping trolley has 361 times more bacteria than a toilet doorknob. From the 3rd of July. Saying 3/4 of trolleys across a range of stores were swabbed by scientists, and they contain the most harmful types of bacteria, which include deadly E. coli and salmonella. The online retailer ReuseThisBag.com commissioned someone to carry out this swab test. It's just an ad. It's just an ad, nothing more than that.
If people are using bathrooms correctly, the bathroom doorknob should be cleaner than anywhere else.
Yes, because you should have washed your hands
before you open
touch the doorknob.
But also, I don't believe this research.
No,
I don't believe this research has been well conducted. This is just an advert pretending to be health news. We see this all the fucking time. You run down the list of headlines in the health section of the Daily Mail, the Express, the Telegraph, and they aren't studies. They are basically PR stories. They are adverts, or this week it'll say one thing, and the next week it'll see the opposite thing. Not because the science is changing, not because the experts are changing their mind, but because they are just pulling press releases from a different source with a different biased outcome, and they wonder why people don't trust studies.
Yeah, we've been saying on the show for some time that these kind of things will undermine public trust in science.
Yeah, and now they've got a fucking report that measures that, and they misreport that report. The report from the Academy of Medical Sciences is really pretty good, and it's got some really interesting and really important things to say about how doctors engage with patients and how we as patients can be better informed and better and collaborate better and engage better with our own healthcare. The media don't get to report on the gap between what patients believe and what the evidence says, as if they aren't responsible for a huge chunk of that gap.
So everyone sent me this.
Good.
Everyone.
I didn't send it to you.
Sent me this. Everyone.
Neither did I.
You both did.
Did.
You just don't know yet. So the weird power of the placebo effect explained, said Vox. Yes, the placebo effect is all in your mind and it's real, they say, for a given definition of real. But there you go. Some people demanded that I tear this article down. Some people simply asked what I thought, and some people just dismissed it as a bit of fluff. For my money, I found the article to be something of a mixed bag. And there were some good points in there. There were some great points in there, even actually. But there were a few points where I feel that they missed the mark.
I find that's a fairly reliable overview of most Vox science articles I've read. They usually they do get some stuff all right. They're not too bad. I mean, they always have ridiculously sensational headlines, but
I mean, the headline is one of the worst things about this.
I skim-read that article and found the same kind of thing. I thought the headline, when you see the headline, you think, bloody hell, what are they saying? You kind of go down as you're going to, and I
mean, the weird power of the placebo effect explained. Okay, well, that could be going either way. But yes, the placebo effect is all in your mind and it's real. For a fixed definition of real, as I say. I should put my standard disclaimer out here that I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical researcher, I'm not an academic. These are just my thoughts as an interested layman. And before we get into the article, I want to have a very quick recap. So there is a narrative which is accepted by the general public and even by some people in the medical community, which posits that the placebo effect, being the apparent change in the condition of a patient following an inert intervention, it posits that the placebo effect is some sort of mind over matter thing, the amazing power the mind has over the body, a mind-body healing process, and so on. Convince a patient that they have taken a drug and they will experience the effects of that drug even if all you gave them was a dummy pill. This standard narrative also says that placebo effects rely on deceiving your patients, and so they are unethical to use. This has been challenged, however, in recent years by new research which shows that placebo effects are observed even when the patient knows that they've been given a dummy pill. This should undermine and contradict the standard narrative, but somehow it has been incorporated into it as that's just how weird the placebo effect is. Oh, it's so crazy. So that's the accepted narrative of placebo. An alternative narrative that explains the same observations, and a narrative which I find more compelling, says that placebo effects are mostly or entirely comprised of statistical effects and biased reporting. Convince a patient that they have taken a drug and they will tell you that they are experiencing the effects of that drug, which is not the same thing as any actual physiological response. There's no need to invoke a mysterious mind-body healing process or to decree that the placebo effect is one of the most powerful medical responses there is, because actually the effect is not real in a physiological sense. We can also recognize that a certain percentage of patients will improve anyway, no matter what you do, because of statistical effects and because many conditions will run their course and spontaneously resolve anyway. This will explain why patients improve on placebo, even when they are aware that they've just taken sugar pills. This actually makes complete sense when we don't posit that the placebo effect is a powerful medical response, but rather a bucket into which we toss our biases and other contextual effects so we can make proper account of them later. The article from Vox starts by talking about the decline effect. Do we know the decline effect? Are you familiar with the decline effect?
Vaguely,
I am.
The decline effect, at least in this context, it actually came out of parapsychology, the decline effect originally. It came out of kind of paranormal
yes,
research.
it did, yeah.
But the decline effect in this context is where a drug appears to have a weaker effect over time. So painkillers don't work as well today as they did 20 years ago. Antidepressants don't work as well today as they did 20 years ago, and so on. That's the same is true as antibiotics, but for quite different reasons. There's no reason to think that painkillers should be working poorer today than they did 20 years ago. So why might this be? Why might the decline effect be a thing?
Why might it be?
Vox describes it as an increase in the placebo effect. Placebos are, they claim, getting more powerful. And the more powerful the placebo, the less powerful the active drug, because the power of the drug is determined by contrasting it with the placebo. So the larger the placebo effect, the smaller the active effect.
Do they specify which countries the placebo effect is getting strongest in?
That's
Are
true.
they also going to say, like, well, we know placebos are strongest in Germany?
If we do our medical research in Germany, it turns out none of our drugs work. It's
They should
kind
go
of crazy.
hyper-local and just find the exact town in Germany where the placebos are strongest and then send a lot of sick people there. If that's what they believe, if they believe placebos are stronger in Germany, they should be directly advocating that we send sick patients to Germany.
To Germany to receive treatment.
Yeah, to receive placebo treatment, yeah.
Quoting from Vox, researchers found...
Is that why homeopathy was invented in Germany?
Quoting from Vox, researchers found that when they started looking closely at pain drug trials, an average of 27% of patients in clinical trials in 1996 reported a pain reduction from the new drug compared to placebo. In 2013, it was 9%. So people reporting an effect of painkillers went from 27% down to 9%. Now, under the standard mind over matter narrative, this is a strange and mysterious thing. Why should placebos work better today than they did 20 years ago? Is it because we've got greater faith in doctors and medical science? Is it the amazing power of the mind over the body means that because we believe in our doctors more, because their coats are whiter now? It means that somehow sugar works as a painkiller now. I have got no idea. But under the alternative narrative, this is quite simply explained by improved rigor and tighter protocols in our trials.
Yeah.
As trial design improves, we control for more biases and contextual effects. Those effects are captured in our placebo data, which therefore shows a larger effect. In fact, those effects were always there, we just hadn't controlled for them properly, which means they misattributed to the active intervention and made it appear as if the painkillers worked better than they did. The effect of the drug actually hasn't changed at all. Just the effect that we appear to measure has changed because we have tightened up our protocols. So that's the decline effect. I was quite happy to see Vox talking about how there is not just one placebo effect, but rather a family of overlapping psychological phenomena.
See, when I got to that part of the article, because I'd read through to this bit and went, oh, there's some weird stuff there. And I got to this part of the article and said, oh, they're now going to break down what the placebo effect is.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the assessment that it's a family of overlapping psychological phenomena, although I would probably describe it as a family of statistical and cognitive effects rather than psychological. Vox quote Franklin Miller, who is a bioethicist from the American National Institute of Health, who says, I see the placebo effect as a kind of loose family of different phenomena that are just yoked together by this term. Sooner or later, we'll get rid of them and talk more specifically about each of its components.
Yeah.
And that's exactly on the money for me. As we come to understand each of the effects in the placebo bucket, we can stop thinking of them as some sort of mind over matter magic and start to understand what is actually going on. Regression to the mean will happen with or without placebo. Regression to the mean will happen in a no treatment context as well. So is it fair to call that a placebo effect? Should that be in our placebo bucket? Or should we consider that actually that's a separate effect? The same is true for the natural history of the condition. Colds will get better no matter what you do. So is it fair to call it a placebo effect when you take a sugar pill and 2 weeks later your cold is better? I don't think it is. I think that is something that should be taken out of the placebo bucket and understood separately. And my view is that once we've understood everything in the placebo bucket, there's actually nothing left in the placebo bucket. Indeed, Vox goes on to list some of the things which could contribute to an apparent placebo effect without having to invoke speculative mind-body healing processes. They cite regression to the mean. They talk about confirmation bias. They talk about classical conditioning, effects which will manifest in the placebo arm of a clinical trial, but which might not be reasonable to characterize as the placebo effect under the accepted mind-body healing model. Then there are other things which they talk about a bit more naively, chalking things up to the placebo effect, which I don't really think are due. Social learning, for example. They talk about social learning. So imagine a study where you are a patient and you are able to freely associate with other patients. And it turns out that you're on placebo, but all your mates are on the active intervention. And when you see those around you talking about how well the drug is working and how much better they are feeling, you are more likely to report that you are feeling better even if you don't, even if you are on the sham intervention. Most importantly, you will be reporting feeling better, which is not the same thing as actually feeling better. You may be feeling just as shitty, but you are reporting feeling better because of essentially peer pressure. Because everyone else is saying, well, this shit is the fucking bomb. And you're going, it kind of isn't, but I want to fit in.
Who are you hanging out with, Mike? Who are all of your friends who walk around going, this shit is the fucking bomb?
This shit is the fucking bomb. That's what you say when you're in the aspirin study.
Actually, Emma, your boyfriend Ad refers to some painkillers that I've once lent him for a bad knee as Alice bombs.
You see? And now we all do because of peer pressure.
Yeah, good.
Alice has the good stuff.
So you may be reporting that you're feeling better when you're not because everyone else in your group is saying, yes, this stuff is working really well. You may be exaggerating how much better you feel because although you do feel a little better because regression to the mean or because some conditions improve over time, so you feel a little bit better, but you exaggerate that improvement, again, because of peer pressure, because everyone else around you is going, this stuff is really good. Or you could be misremembering how bad you felt at baseline. You genuinely do think you're feeling better, even if nothing has improved, because you misremember how bad you felt before. And so you honestly report an improvement, even when there isn't an improvement. You can characterize this as recall bias.
Yeah.
Or it could be a combination of all of these effects, recall bias, social pressure, statistical regressions, and it all comes together to manifest an effect in the placebo data which doesn't actually represent any meaningful physiological change. It just looks like it does on paper. Vox also talks about empathy as having a placebo effect, citing a study by Ted Kapchuk, who they describe as one of the world's leading experts on placebo. And a lot of the research on placebo that I read has been authored or co-authored by Kapchuk.
I recognise that name.
Yeah, I did as well.
Possibly.
Yeah. Ben Goldacre talks about him a lot. The specific study that they're talking about took patients with IBS and split them into 3 groups. The first group were given sham acupuncture. The second group were given sham acupuncture from a practitioner who empathized with them and said, like, yeah, IBS is hard. Yeah, it's tough shit, man. The fucking bomb. And the third group were told, you're on the waiting list for the sham acupuncture. Presumably not sham.
Yeah.
But you're on the waiting list for the acupuncture.
You're in the line to get nothing.
So effectively, they're a no treatment group. And patients were obviously not aware that the acupuncture was sham acupuncture. And the results showed that people on the waiting list improved, which is not a surprise because statistical regression.
Especially with something variable like IBS.
Especially, with IBS, which is all over the place, People in the...
That's an unfortunate... Very unfortunate turn of phrase.
Yeah, I've got a habit of that. People in the acupuncture group improved more than people on the waiting list. And people in the acupuncture plus empathy group improved even more than that. Frustratingly, the paper is light on p-values, giving only p-values for the trend line between the groups, not direct group-to-group comparisons. And often looking at the charts, there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of difference between the groups, especially between no treatment and acupuncture groups. But when you include the empathy group as well, the trend line is significant, even if the difference between no treatment and acupuncture without empathy doesn't actually look to be that big a deal. That's just me looking at it going, that doesn't look a big deal, because there's no fucking p-values for me to tell. Which is frustrating. But nevertheless, there is an improvement in the acupuncture plus empathy group. Now, under the standard placebo narrative, Vox described this as, it is not about the pills, it's about the person who gave them to you and the rituals and encounters that are associated with them. However, I would point out that naturally, being placebo research, this is all patient-reported data, and you are more likely to report that you have been helped by somebody who was nice to you, even if your condition is actually unchanged. And you may even believe that yourself.
Have they thought about giving sham acupuncture by someone who's an absolute dick?
By an absolute dick, and see if it doesn't. It sees it shows a nocebo effect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
volunteering.
And of course, sometimes that's actually enough, especially in the case of pain, as we've discussed before. Sometimes modifying the patient's biases and expectations is enough to help them get by, even if we haven't actually changed anything physiologically. Vox says, that isn't to say that self-reported improvement on placebo doesn't matter. In many illnesses, patients would love a greater opportunity to ignore their symptoms, which in many cases is true. But we have to absolutely recognize this for what it is, which is modifying a bias, not a powerful mind-body healing process. Vox goes on to quote a guy called Tor Wager, or Wagger, or Wagner, or something. There's no N in it. It's Wager, spelled like wager, but I can't believe his name is Tor Wager.
It might be Vega.
It might be Vega or Wagger or something like that. He's from the University of Colorado at Boulder. He says what we should be concluding from these studies is something like placebo affects the pain you report.
Yes. Okay.
Which I think is an interesting way to put it, and it was nice to see that quote in the article.
Yeah.
That a scientist sitting there saying, placebo affects the pain that you report. So as I say, this study is something of a mixed bag. They do cite the 2010 Cochrane review, which concludes that there is no objective effects for placebo. And they talk about what placebos can and can't do, including a line where they say you can't classically condition your brain to make chemotherapy drugs, even if you can condition it to release endogenous opioids. Because your brain just doesn't work like that. It can produce opioids. Yeah. It can't produce chemotherapy. So it's not like you can just, you take
cancer away,
fake chemotherapy after you've been on chemotherapy for a while and suddenly your brain starts producing chemotherapy chemicals. That's not how that's going to work. So I was quite happy to see that. I was also quite happy to see Cochrane tweeting about this article, and also to see Vox explicitly saying placebos tweak our experience of symptoms, not their underlying causes. So that's a line directly from the article. Which, to be honest, I think is a best case interpretation, at least from the data that I have read. I've yet to see a study which controls for the difference between a patient actually experiencing their symptoms differently and a patient telling you that they are experiencing their symptoms differently for whatever reason, be that confirmation bias, recall bias, learned behavior, the Hawthorne effect, the experimenter effect, or whatever. That might not even be a study that's possible to be able to tell the difference between a patient's actual experience and the report of a patient's actual experience. Yeah. We may not actually be able to do that. That might be a physically impossible thing to do. But there is nothing in this article, I think, which contradicts my bias and stats version of the placebo effect. And much in there which supports it and even makes more sense under it. I think Vox did really well on this one. It's just a shame that they failed to hit the mark in one or two places. So that's my listener question, responding again to about 8 listener questions at once. If you have a question that you want to send to us, you can send that through to podcast@merseysideskeptics.org.uk, or you can get in touch with us via Twitter or via our Facebook. So, Marsh, it's the Edinburgh Festival soon. I understand that you and indeed Alice are heading up there to perform, not just to look. You're doing your one-man show, your stand-up comedy routine. Alice is lying to some kids. It's how it's going to. So what you up to in Edinburgh? What are you guys doing in Edinburgh?
Well, you're up before me.
I'm there. Yeah, I'm the day before Marsh on Wednesday the 16th, talking about cancer. Obviously, I mean, I could not.
Yeah, it was either that or sex.
Okay.
Yeah.
But And this is at the Fringe
Edinburgh
of Reason.
Skeptics on the Fringe,
Yeah. Organised by the Edinburgh Skeptics.
Yes, you can be the Banshees Labyrinth.
Mm-hmm.
on the Wednesday 16th, is it? They've got a big... I mean, they do this every year, but they've got a great kind of program of lots of speakers. I think for, is it 20 or 23 days of the month they're putting speakers on, and it's a really great kind of lineup. I'm on Thursday the 17th. The Thursday. I'm the day after Alice. Yeah. I'll be talking about PR and sort of the PR stuff I do has kind of segued neatly into the fact that the whole media is now a complete mess of fake news and craziness. So I'm sort of talking about from PR to fake news, basically. And that's going to be on the 17th in the Banshees Labyrinth. But there's lots of other things. If anyone's going up for the Edinburgh Festival, which is worth going up for generally anyway, because it's good fun. We go up most years, don't we, Emma?
We do, but I'm not going this year.
You're not this year because you heard that Alice is speaking. I have no interest in hearing Alice talk about cancer, not in the slightest.
No, I went up last year, but I'm not going to be able to go up this year because I'm too busy, unfortunately, which is a shame. Because I really enjoyed myself last year. It was a terrific amount of fun.
Event, yeah.
And if people are going up for it, they should definitely check out the Skeptics and the Fringe stuff, because there's stuff on every single day pretty much, so they should check that out. And there's always an interesting skeptic-y, science-y talk going on there.
More locally, we've got our annual barbecue picnic event, Skeptics in the Park, which is on the 16th of July at from 1 o'clock in Sefton Park in Liverpool. We're going to be in our regular spot, which is up by that big glass thing.
The Palm
Are we going to have
House.
another rubbish gazebo?
No.
No,
we're not letting Mike buy a gazebo because he enjoyed putting it up, and then it got quite dangerous when it fell apart.
Was really dangerous.
And it blew away. Yeah.
So it blew away and sheared the metal pipes in half.
Yeah.
Which then became a real danger.
Yeah, they were wind-borne sharp metal pipes swinging around.
I don't think that's my fault. I blame God. Specifically for that one. So no, the Skepti tent is no more. So if it rains, we're getting wet.
Which is fine.
It's the day before my graduation.
It's the day before your graduation.
It's a Sunday.
Yeah.
Magnificent. So we get to celebrate you being a doctor again.
Again, yeah. I'm just dragging it out.
Will you bring a copy of your thesis along?
I will not bring a copy of my thesis along. I promise.
So that's 1 o'clock by the Palm House in Sefton Park on the 16th of July. We've also got Liverpool Skeptics in the Pub coming up. We have got Barry King, who's going to be talking about relativity.
I think that's going to be a good talk.
Yeah, I think so.
That's on the 20th of July, so shortly after the barbecue event. That's in our regular venue, which is the Vines on Lime Street. You'll find information about these events and all of our other events up on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Mersey Skeptics, or you can just search for Merseyside Skeptics and you'll find us up there. If you don't like our Facebook group, you should go and do that, especially if you're local, because we put all of our
you were confusing me there, because you said if you don't like our Facebook group, but you said it like if you don't like it, like and I thought what you can go fuck yourselves. How are you finishing that sentence?
Yeah, if you don't like it, then lump it.
Yeah,
is what it is. They should
have a lump button on Facebook.
People keep saying they want a dislike button, like a thumbs down button, and Facebook refused to do it. What they need is a lump.
Is a lump button,
a lump it button. Yeah. So that's the Merseyside Skeptics event. We've also got QED. So we have announced the final two speakers for our QED lineup, which is
Sanala Naruku. He was the one who had to flee India, having disproved that a statue wasn't really crying. It was just having toilet water dripping from its eyes into people's open mouths.
Yes, which is nice.
People were so annoyed by that they were going to physically hurt him and put him in jail. So he sensibly fled India, unfortunately. Yeah.
Terrifying. So we've got that, and we've got James Ball as well, who is formerly of WikiLeaks.
He used to be with Wiki. Well, he used to report on some of WikiLeaks' stuff, but stepped away from when it all went a bit.
When it kind of went a bit.
But he was at the Washington Post. He's worked for the Guardian. He writes for BuzzFeed now. I think some of his work won a Pulitzer Prize at one point too. So, and he's just got a book out called "How Bullshit Rule." It's about fake news and post-truth. So I think it's called Post-Truth: How Bullshit Ruled the World, or something like that. And it's going to be all about the way in which bullshit and unreal stories have infected the media to a point where things are broken, and how Trump and Brexit kind of capitalised on that, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Sanal and James join the rest of our lineup, which includes Helen Chersky, David Gorski, Tim O'Brien, Caroline Rance, Phil Scraton, Covenston Apathy, Simon Singh, Carol Tavares, Sophie Wilson, and of course yourself, Emma.
Yeep.
Which we're all very excited about, having seen your talk before. We're all very, very excited about, so that's going to be awesome.
You've all lost your minds.
So
It'll be fantastic.
tickets for QED are available now. You can get them at QEDcon.org, priced £109, £75 if you're a student or if you're under 18. And you'll hear more about QED because even though we've completed announcing our main stage lineup, we've still got podcasts, panels, and workshops
and just stuff
to announce,
generally,
as well as what other shenanigans that we managed to get up to in order to make QED the best event it can be, which is what we try to do every single year. So if you're not coming along, you are missing out. Aside from that, then, I think that is all we have time for.
Oh, I'm sat here, all I can do is smell the garlic bread and things from the Italian next door, and it's distracting me way too much.
Yeah, and I have to live here. Every time you have the balcony door
What
open,
a hardship,
you can
Alice.
smell. I constantly want to go and spend money in Amalia restaurant and buy all their tasty garlic bread because their kitchen's right under my window. It smells amazing.
I mean, the breatharians think that you can live on that. You can just live on the inhaled smell of garlic bread. It's absolutely fine. So all that remains then is for me to thank Marsh for coming along today.
Thank you.
Thank you to Alice.
Thank you.
And thank you to Emma.
You're welcome.
See, that's good. So that makes much more sense than anything you guys say. We have been the Skeptics with a K, and we will see you next time.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.
Skeptics with a K is a production of the Merseyside Skeptics Society. For more information, visit our website www.merseysideskeptics.org.uk or email podcast@merseysideskeptics.org.uk.